Hey, Ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Aiden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of paranormal folklore from Latin American and Hispanic cultures. Now, if you are a best Ghoul friend on Patreon, you have already seen that things look a little different. I'm joined by some people today. Some people, right? That is because today I have the privilege and the honor. I'm so excited to finally, it's been a long time coming, interview the owners of City Alchemist here in Austin, Texas. Please welcome to Susto today, Alexis and Eric. Thank you all so much for, I was going to say thank you for being here, but I'm the one that's here. Thank you for having me. Oh, thank you so much. So could you please, maybe just for anybody who for some reason has not heard of you all, give a brief introduction of who you are and where we are today?
Yeah. So my name is Alexis Arredondo. I'm from South Texas, a small little town near the border called Hebbronville. And I grew up kind of in that area learning, kind of like Susto, like learning all the folklore, things like that. So being very enamored with things like curanderismo, brujeria, and is opposed to just people who just kind of listen to it tell the story. I wanted to kind of learn it. And so I started learning from a bruja. I started learning from healers and people from the community over time. And then eventually met Eric, and he and I realized that we had one similar goal, which was to own a witch shop one day. And this is it. 5 years later? Something like 5 years later, this is where we're at. So our technically third location.
Yeah. So my name's Eric. I grew up in El Paso, Texas. I share a similar story to Alexis. Very fascinated with like ghost stories, like folklore from El Paso specifically because there's so much. I also grew up in a very spiritual family. Specifically, they would practice things like folk Catholicism, curanderismo, a little bit of hechiceria. And I was really always drawn to that. I don't know why. I always felt like innately I knew that there was like a spiritual world even before I knew what spirituality was. And growing up, I was really fortunate to be guided by my grandma, my mom, and my aunts. And they really encouraged me to practice and to learn. And Alexis and I, we both share an interest in a lot of like spiritual practices, and we both practice a lot of spiritual things.
Yeah. So speaking of those things, because I'm curious to know, and you kind of spoke about it with your upbringings and your elders, your relatives, how did you get into practicing more specifically like brujeria and curanderismo? Yes, but we know that those could be kind of umbrella terms and there are more specific practices. So if you had to identify your practices to, you're meeting someone new, what would you tell them those practices are, those traditions? And like, how did you find your way to those specific things?
Wow. How much time do we have? I mean, if I had to brand myself, I don't like branding myself at all, but if I had to, I always tell people I'm a modern day necromancer in the sense that all of the traditions that I practice have one thing in common, which is working with spirits. So I'm a spiritualist medium. I work with Palo Mayombe, which comes from Cuba, which is very heavily associated with spirits. I have like kind of base level initiations in Santeria and Haitian Vodou. Also works a lot with spirits. So there's a lot of just connection to spirit and understanding how we can use spirits as a form of communication, for healing, to give messages, and kind of connecting with spirit on that level, right? And even, allowing them to do things for us and sending them to do things for us. So I think finding my way to that was kind of like when I moved from Hebbronville to Corpus Christi for college. I started meeting people in the communities of more like curanderismo and brujeria as well. And I started working with Santa Muerte at the time of 2003, actually. So it's been about 20 years, a little over 20 years, at a botanica there. And that's how I started kind of learning, is going to the botanicas, asking questions, being taught by them, essentially. And then eventually finding teachers when I moved here to Austin. And I had found a teacher here who was kind of guiding me with things regarding like Palo and Haitian Vodou and things along those lines. But at the same time, not really fully getting initiated until we both met a local business owner's husband who was involved with the tradition and kind of helped us kind of branch out even more so. And that's kind of how I ended up on that path. Eric was already on the path of Santeria when I had met him, so he already had that knowledge. But that's kind of how it all played out in a very, very shortened version.
Yeah. And Eric, what about you?
It's interesting because I don't really consider myself anything absolute, right? I think if anything, I'm probably always going to be some sort of seeker, but I do wear different hats, I guess. Specifically, I am initiated into Lukumi Santeria, and I have a house here in Austin, Texas, which we call Ile. So I have responsibilities to help my godchildren evolve within that tradition. Um, I also do practice, I guess, like you said, the umbrella term of curanderismo, because I have been giving people here in the community limpias for about 2 years now. And then just general magic in general, right? I think Alexis and I also share that, where we're very interested in putting the puzzle together, because once you start to understand these traditions, you see, they all fit into something. They're all coming together somehow, you know? So definitely, I think probably just a seeker.
Yeah, I love that. This is, I think, a really good segue into the next question I had, but I wanted to get you all's take on something. So you mentioned Palo Mayombe, and I think many people are familiar with the story of Adolfo Constanzo and Mark Kilroy. And from what I read when I did my episode on that, what I kind of picked up was that people were a little, I guess it was like a hot button topic. You know, people were like, you know, he's skewing the practice. He's doing it not, I don't know if I could say he's doing it wrong, but like he's basically not like, it's hard to say. And I guess that's why I'm trying to ask you is I want to know, I guess, maybe what your take on that or your stance on is on that, if you are okay with
Yeah, absolutely,
maybe giving your opinion.
I mean, it's good to talk about these things, because I think one of the reasons people fear these practices so much is the silence and nobody knowing what's happening. That's why I teach these classes, even though you have to be initiated to practice. It doesn't mean that I can't teach you the basics and the foundations. So one of the things about the Mark Kilroy case in particular with El Padrino, as they called him, yes, there were inconsistencies in his practice. He technically, from what I've been told, was not fully initiated into Palo, and showed up in Mexico knowing, with the knowledge that he did know, very charismatic person. We've actually seen this with people that we know even around here who come off as very charismatic and pretend to know all these things that they don't actually know. And, you know, over time, those things get revealed. And in that situation, that's exactly what happened. If you look at some of the photos of the Marquero case, there were like altars with like Santa Muerte and a mixture of all kinds of different practices, which tells me that that's not Palo, because Palo is very specific. Even the different forms of Palo, there's like San Cristo de Viaje and all these like cruzados or crossed houses. Even those don't work with things like Santa Muerte or work with other practices. They still kind of stay within the Cuban type of religion. So that tells me a lot. That tells me that there was definitely some mixing, and even the kind of the ideology that he created, the whole like, oh, well, if you want your prenda, which is your spiritual pot, to be strong, you got to put the muscles of a strong person inside of it. That's not the way it's done. It is on a other level, but not on that level, right? It's more so things that represent the spirit, things from nature. So, for example, for strength, we might put something like a tooth of a tiger or something along those lines, as opposed to, you know, a human being. So I think that a lot of it was just mixed, and then them kind of coming up with their own way of understanding how to do that practice. So it was definitely not correct in that sense.
Yeah.
I will say something though, and I think it's very interesting because Alexis hits on definitely the main point, where it's not an authentic practice in the sense of traditional Palo Mayombe. In my opinion, what we saw there was a perfect example of like Mexican magic. The idea of this accumulation of different types of practices coming together to form this one sort of energy. And it's interesting because we live along the border and we go to these border towns, right? And once you get there, if you practice spirituality, there's a vibration and you can feel it. right? It's in the Valley, it's in Corpus, El Paso, even San Antonio, right? And I think that with that type of thing or practice that he was doing, we started to see what like the practices of Mexico were starting to become, which I think is super interesting and beautiful.
Yeah.
Not the murders, obviously,
Yeah.
right? But the idea of like Mexican magic becoming its own thing.
Yeah. Again, perfect segue. It's like you guys are psychics or something. I wanted to ask about this idea of the blending of practices and maybe where there's opportunity for that to happen. And there are traditions or practices that are maybe not meant to, but that you kind of practice as an individual thing, and you say, this is not something that I am willing or able or I want to incorporate with or blend with other practices?
That's a really good question. I mean, even earlier, Eric mentioned this idea of like, we are seekers, we are students. We're never going to be like, oh, we know all, right? We're always learning. And we do have other practices that don't come from Latin America. We practice like Hindu tantric practices, Buddhist tantric practices. And I think for us, or as I say for me for sure, there is a definite understanding of how they can relate to other practices in Mexico and folk practices and traditions. And we can see those connections and make those connections, but we can also do that without blending them completely to the point where now we're just calling it something completely different, right? So I'll give you an example of this. I always tell my students, especially students who are non-POC, for example, who want to practice things like hechicería and brujería, they're like, well, I can't practice it because I'm not Hispanic, I'm not Mexican descent. And I say, that's not necessarily true. You can practice it. Just don't make it public. Just don't go on Instagram and be like, look at my brujeria, look at my curanderismo. I said, it's your personal practice.
I'm doing limpias for $25.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's your personal practice. Yeah. Make it your personal practice. Mm-hmm. You know, if you look at hechiceros, like what we call sorcerers, essentially, and brujos in Mexico, there's a lot of mixing. You know, if they need to call Venus on a Friday to do a love spell, they will. If they're going to call Santa Muerte to do a love spell, they will. It's whoever is going to come along and do the work, right? They don't necessarily...
Whoever picks up the phone.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They don't have to just choose one.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a good way to do it, to blend a lot of these practices and make it your own. But the issue is that everybody wants to make everything public. And they want to post it on Instagram and they want to post it on Facebook or wherever. And immediately you're going to get feedback because now you have pissed somebody off, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess when we talk about like traditions, it's very important for me specifically to make sure that when we practice formal things like Santeria, Palomayombe, Kimbanda, whatever, well, not whatever because they're very powerful, but we have to do it in a traditional way. In that context, we cannot be bringing in outside influences. It already in itself is perfect. It has its own divination system, hierarchy, everything else. But when we talk about magia, like magic, brujeria, hechicería, it's personal because you're learning from where you grew up. So every town, every city was going to have a different flavor. You're going to have the foundation, absolutely, right? But the more you learn, the more you start to incorporate from different people and different styles. So for example, having the shop, we start to meet a lot of people. And I met a group of Venezuelans and they started teaching me their practices within the Maria Leonza cult, right?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I saw similarities and they say, try this, try that. And now as a practitioner, I can use that in my arsenal, have that in my arsenal. You see?
Wow.
Hey, what's up? I'm Charlie.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are Believing the Bizarre,
a paranormal podcast that dives into the unknown and the unusual every Tuesday.
We discuss hauntings, cryptids, aliens, UFO encounters, conspiracies, and more.
And we break down whether or not we find them believable.
All right, listen, if you're not paying for electricity, you're not paying for dinner.
Saw a terrifying looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes.
Almost reached it when the laughter stopped suddenly, and a sound behind me made me turn around.
Sorry, I was gonna do it, but then I had SpaceX.
So we got you covered, whether you like horror or laughs, or both. We actually really hope it's both.
With over 3 million downloads, you'll be joining a bizarro community that we promise is more than just Mothman and our parents.
We even take creepy stories from our listeners and turn them into episodes.
Check out Believing the Bizarre on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Believing the Bizarre, a podcast as bizarre as you are.
So I kind of want to shift gears here, but of course, all related. I'm curious about what the journey was from like brujeria to business owners. And I know that they're not maybe mutually exclusive. And I guess that's where I'm curious is I do want to hear about your journey, but also maybe like a fun kind of question, because we know that there are workings out there that people can use. Like how much of your practice was involved in manifesting and creating and building this space?
That's a good question. Yeah. I will say this, something that Eric taught me, and I say it all the time, is if you're working these traditions, if you're doing these practices and things are not getting better in your life, then you're doing something wrong or you're on the wrong path, basically. And I would say that a lot of the success of this shop comes from the fact that we have been working these traditions correctly with a good heart. We're not out there saying, you need a limpia? Okay, it's going to be $6,000 and I'm going to just use an egg and I'm going to just like half-ass it, you know? Yeah. We're always doing things for our community. Sometimes we don't even charge because we know that they can't afford it, you know? It has to be done with heart. That's the biggest thing. And I think that's why we've been so blessed with these spaces. I will also say that a big part of it is finding a good balance with spirituality and business, because they are two different monsters sometimes. And a lot of people have a tendency to think, well, I'm spiritual and I can do cleansings, therefore I can start a business. But I will say the hardest thing is that nobody ever tells you how hard it is. Yeah. And it's consistent work, consistently having to, do events, consistently having to do things for the community. And I will say that most of it has been blessings from the spirits. And I've always said that. We've always said that. Like, we're extremely blessed by the spirits because they've guided us to be able to do this work, not only for the community, but to have a beautiful shop on a beautiful location on historic East 6th Street, Yeah. So I think that that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I like the question you talk about, the idea of manifestation, because if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't do a lot of spellcraft for myself. I don't need, it's not that I don't need to, it's my awareness has shifted to a different place, which is manifestation, which is if I want things to work, then I need to make sure that I'm doing my part as well, right? I send that signal out to the energies that I work with, and then when we're in connection, I start to manifest. So I don't even do spell work for myself that much anymore, and I feel extremely blessed, extremely protected, right? The business aspect in it is like totally separate, in my opinion, from my spiritual practice, because being a business owner comes with its own set of responsibilities, not only for me, but for the community as well. But yeah, being able to manifest is interesting, because I think that Alexis and I manifested the shop, and I literally manifested this shop with a playlist. I started listening to songs, right? And I got really inspired when we were, even before Magia, our book, that playlist I started to put together on Spotify. I was listening to it and just envisioning my shop and envisioning people. And literally, I swear, 6 months later, we opened up a little small pop-up. And then half a year later, we opened up next door. Oh, wow. And literally still playing that same playlist.
Wow.
I remember he would always say, like, wouldn't it be great if our shop was on 6th Street? We should have a shop on 6th Street one day. One day we're going to have a shop on 6th Street. And here we are.
Here we are, yeah.
Yeah, one day, like, Alexis and I were driving during the pandemic. It was like right after, like, the lockdown was like lessening up and people were able to like move around. And we had just started talking about opening up our shop, and I was like, let's go just drive around and see if we find anything. And Alexis was just like, well, that's not the way you do it. You have to work with like a realtor and all this stuff. I'm like, no, we'll drive around. And we found a little spot on Cesar Chavez Street, and we called the number. And our landlord now, she asked us, well, what do you do? And we're like, how do we explain what we do, right? well, we sell like crystals and incense, trying to make it very light. And she's like, oh, do you do like spiritual cleansings and readings? And I was like, yeah, we do. She's like, okay, can you meet me on 6th Street in this location in about 15 minutes?
Oh my God.
And literally right after that, everything just started falling into place.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're lucky. Our landlord is from Peru. And she does spiritual cleanses.
She gets
and
it.
all that. She
Sends her, like, she's employees, a lot of employees, and she'll send them to us to get cleansings. She'll reach out to us because sometimes she has to clear out houses because she also owns houses, and then she'll be like, they left some weird stuff. Can you come clear it out? And just bad energy. So we'll go and help her out in that sense also.
Wow. It's like you just had to ask the city for a spot.
Honestly, I tell people that all the time.
Yeah.
When people first move to Austin and they get into a new house and like, I feel weird, I don't feel like I'm there yet. I'm like, well, did you introduce yourself to Austin, the city? Because there's energies here before any sort of development was here. When you start giving your acknowledgement to them, they start to protect you and they start to help you. Mm-hmm. People don't realize that.
Yeah, I will say when I moved here, maybe about 3 years ago, and it was during when like the housing bubble was like, it was just rapid and things were going before we could even get an application in. And it got to the point where I had come to visit and I was so frustrated because I had a job opportunity. I was ready to move and my life was kind of stagnant at that point. And so we were like, we need to make this happen. And so at one point I came to visit and I just like out loud, I was like, please accept us. Like, this is like, we need this, like this is the next step for us, and just saying it out loud. And so yeah, hearing you all kind of talk about this too, and like your journey with just finding the physical space too is like, it takes me back to that moment. It almost felt like desperation, but also like you said, just introducing myself and saying like, hey, this is my next step, I'm going to be here, please help us like land on our feet. And we really did. I love where we ended up.
That's awesome.
It's funny because you talk about desperation, right? And I always teach people, whenever you're in desperation mode, what happens inside? We're like this, right? And nothing can reach us. We're bundled up in a knot. And as much as it's cliche to say, well, just relax. You don't tell someone who's already upset to relax.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, it's true, because once you start lessening up and that knot starts to unravel, everything opens up and everything falls into place.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So the next question is actually a question from Patreon. And this is a question from Maritza Fernandez. Thank you so much for sending your question in. And Maritza and I would like to know, what are some good starting points for a beginner looking to decolonize their thinking around traditional spiritual practices and folk remedies? Are there any recommendations for books, classes, general tips, especially for those who are interested but are healing from religious trauma and are unsure about the basics?
Really, really good question. Yeah. Maritza?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Maritza, for that one. This is something that we get asked a lot, actually, just because we are POC, people of Mexican descent, and we did write 2 books on Mexican witchcraft and magic.
Do you all have them here?
I think we sold out. We had some, we just sold out. We can never hold on to them. And we signed them too, so but we will get them in. But I will say this. So there's a lot of talk about decolonizing practices. And I say the first thing you have to work on is letting go of fear, because that is the first thing that colonization did, was take our normal everyday practices and put fear behind them, calling them things of the devil, calling them things. And even that, I always tell people, like, they're like, oh, well, I don't mess with anything devil related. I'm like, you have to understand that that's also a form of colonization.
Yeah. Who decided that?
Yes, exactly. Because they created essentially an enemy, right? With being the devil. And where most people were afraid of that, many of the older Mexica and Aztec practitioners were like, "Oh, good, a new superpower that even the enemy is afraid of," that kind of thing. So a lot of it was embraced, and you see practices with El Diablo, like we have up here in Guatemala and Oaxaca and all the areas with heavily Mexica influence as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing I always tell people is it's not impossible, but it is almost impossible to completely decolonize Mexican brujeria, because Mexican brujeria and hechiceria and even curanderismo is a melting pot of so many traditions. And I always give this example all the time, because I had this one person ask, they were like, I don't want to do any Catholic prayers. I don't want to do any Catholic prayers. I just want to do Nahuatl prayers. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to teach you my favorite Nahuatl prayer. And I said, it's Lancinco Totil Tatsin, it's Lancinco Totil Pislin, it's Lancinco Totil Yahuatzin Ipumenawani. And they were like, oh, that's beautiful. What does that mean? I said, it means in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Spirit. I said, because this has become the prayer that we say in Nahuatl to call the four directions. Because remember that that's what they saw when they saw the cross. They said, oh, we have that too. And it's the four directions. So it's been mixed. It's been interwoven. And you still have people to this day in Mexico who will see a Cristo Negro and say, that's not Cristo Negro, that's Tezcatlipoca. You know, they'll say John the Baptist and they say, that's not John the Baptist, that's Tlaloc. So these have been interconnected. And so it's almost impossible to completely decolonize. But if you really, truly want to decolonize the thinking. Don't decolonize the actions.
I have read this really good book called Aztec Philosophy by James Maffei, and the book is not going to teach you how to practice, but it definitely teaches you the metaphysics of the Mexica and the Mesoamerican people. I think if you really want to decolonize your practice, it's best to look into your family and go far, far, far back, as far as you can. You know, you're saying you want to decolonize, so before Spaniards came to the U.S., to Mexico. And once you find out where you're from, start learning the language, start learning the customs, start learning those things. That is, to me, how you start to decolonize your practice, right? Knowing that it's going to be a journey. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult, but it is possible, right? Once you understand, in my opinion, and start to see that it's not like groups of people do not mingle with one another, right? Once you start to really embark on these traditions, you see, oh, but they also believe the same thing, but they twist it a little. Not twisted, they do something a little different. Oh my God, this group of people, they do the same thing that my family does, but they add a little something to it. And you see it all starts to come together. You know, there are some saints in Mexico that are syncretized with Aztec gods. You know, I think that's very interesting and a proof of the resilience of our ancestors to be able to see the similarities in their religion and their spiritual practices with this Catholicism, you know. And from a magical standpoint, right, I think it's super interesting because, like we were talking about in the beginning, we're seekers. We start to see the similarities in everything, right? Another tip is to really understand what's called non-dualism, right? And that's, to me, in my opinion, and what a lot of scholars believe our ancestors believed in. We are not separate from God. We are always connected, and we are God as well. Unlike the Catholic churches, you have to be saved first in order to be with God. But you're still separate, right? But you have to be saved. In a Mesoamerican practice, we're already perfect. We just evolve and evolve and evolve.
I feel like that's a really good place to take a quick break.
Hey, what's up? I'm Charlie.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are Believing the Bizarre.
A paranormal podcast that dives into the unknown and the unusual every Tuesday.
We discuss hauntings, cryptids, aliens, UFO encounters, conspiracies, and more.
And we break down whether or not we find them believable.
All right, listen, if you're not paying for electricity, you're not paying for dinner.
Saw a terrifying looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes.
Almost reached it when the laughter stopped suddenly, and a sound behind me made me turn around.
Sorry, I was gonna do it, but then I had SpaceX.
So we got you covered, whether you like horror or laughs, or both. We actually really hope it's both.
With over 3 million downloads, you'll be joining a bizarro community that we promise is more than just Mothman and our parents.
We even take creepy stories from our listeners and turn them into episodes.
Check out Believing the Bizarre on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Believing the Bizarre, a podcast as bizarre as you are.
Welcome back, cool friends. Again, we are here with Alexis and Eric, the owners of City Alchemist. It's where the witches shop. And it's not only where the witches shop, it's where the witches learn and commune. Can you tell us about the classes and some of the community events that you have held here, or that will be held in the future. And even before, I mentioned in the last maybe episode or two about the Limpia de Huevo, or the egg cleansing class that I was able to come and take here, which I loved. Oh man, it was so good. It was such a good experience. Aside from, just coming to learn and shopping, just every time I have people visit here, especially if it's their first time in Austin or visiting in a long time, I tell them, okay, well, we have to go to City Alchemist, and just so you can at least like get in there. And it feels like coming in and like taking a bath. I don't know, like spirits for me, I love coming here. Just, I like to come and bother you and pop in and like just look around, and because it just feels good aside from like everything that you offer, but also of course including classes and events.
Yeah, I mean, first off, thank you. That's great. We want to be that for people. We want to be that place where people can come in and just like take a breath of relief. Yeah, so we have now, especially that we've moved into this space, it's been a little over a month. We have more space now for community events. We had a space prior to this. It was like a small little warehouse, but it was very small. It could only house maybe like 8 max. So now we had literally 30 people in here last night for an event. So we have been doing mostly things like, movie nights. We're actually doing The Craft on the 14th, which everybody's really excited about. We have been doing, those are like kind of fun things. And then we've been doing classes, which is something we've been wanting to do for a really long time. And we've done a few of them at the old space, but now that we're here in the new space, we have more agility, literally. And that's why I really enjoyed the Limpia de Huevo class. We were able to do it and have people be able to do the limpia on everybody as well. So we do those types of classes. We also have online classes because obviously we have community all over the world. And we have a few that are available now. And then we have some that we offer like kind of seasonally, like our Dia de los Muertos and things like that. And then we also have an online academy called the McMahon Academy where we teach pretty much everything. I have classes there on Palo. We have classes there on Espiritismo. And then we even do things like traditional witchcraft and European witchcraft and spiritism and all kinds of things like that. And then I think a big thing for us is that we're trying to get more people here. So we're seeing about hosting more people from out of town, other healers and practitioners. We have one of our favorite people, Medicinal Melange, actually doing readings here today. She's doing astrology readings, correct? So we definitely have more space, which means more opportunity for the community. Is there anything you want to add to that?
So I think that I'm really excited for the classes coming up. Specifically, we're going to do a candle magic course, beginner and advanced. I did a spiritual bath class last year, and I want to do that again because everyone really liked it. How to prepare and take spiritual baths. Really, anything that people want to learn, I think we're going to start doing it.
What's the class coming up in March? It's on yoga, correct?
Yeah, so we have a class specifically not just on like body postures, but working with the prana, which is like the life force. How to cleanse, how to work with chakras correctly from a traditional Vedantic tantric Indian standpoint or viewpoint. And it's good because when people come into the shop, they're like, well, how do I start? And I'm like, well, you're not going to like this answer. You have to start meditating. You have to start clearing your mind, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to hold the visualizations you need to practice these things. But I can't concentrate. My mind is going everywhere. So that's the point. You're not supposed to concentrate on anything, right? You're just supposed to bring your awareness, understand that you are awareness, right? That is how things manifest. So this class is really cool because the person teaching it has been trained in these practices correctly, how to work with your chakras, how to clean those energies out. And we'll be hosting that in March in a couple weeks.
I'm not sure when exactly this episode will come out. So if people wanted to keep up with the classes and the things that you're offering, where could they find all of that information?
Our website, we usually post everything on there. Instagram is probably our number one, though, because we use it a lot. So we're always posting advertisements on there, stories. When we get new products in, we usually post it on there too. So if you're wanting to know, when our books come back in, we usually post it on there. So follow us on Instagram for sure, which is at City Alchemist, all one word. on Instagram. Apparently, we do have a lot of fake versions of us out there.
Yeah, and I'm always reporting them.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so if we reach out to you wanting to give you a reading, that's not us. And same thing with our personal. We've had fakes of our personal profiles as well.
I have yet to have one, but I'm
haven't had
still
one?
waiting.
I thought you did.
I'll make one.
Yeah.
That's how they say you made it.
Yeah.
It's me, Eric. Send me $25.
Yeah.
And then the website is cityalchemist.com.
Correct.
Awesome. So I also want to talk about some of the misconceptions that are out there about, I'll just use the word brujeria to kind of cover maybe anything that you want to go into. But are there any misconceptions about brujeria, about the work that you do, that you just kind of wish people would let go of?
I mean, one thing that we talk about in our book, Magia, Invoking Mexican Magic, is that where we grew up, brujeria was a very specific term and meant a very specific thing, whereas hechiceria is kind of more so what we're seeing today, and then curanderismo as well. So let me break that down really quickly. So for us, if you were to refer yourself as a bruja or brujo or brujex, that was a fairly like dark thing. It meant that you basically had the power and the ability to manipulate someone's life, make them obsessed over somebody else, possibly kill them or hurt them. It wasn't necessarily a healing term. It wasn't necessarily a general magic term. If you were just practicing general magic, which could include things like love spells, but also money spells and things along those lines, that was known as an hechicero, or somebody who practices folk magic. Whereas if you were a healer, you were a curandero, which is a folk healer. So we've always kind of made that distinction. But of course, nowadays, especially, it's kind of taking on its own term. So you'll have people who practice, for example, they just read tarot. And they say, I read tarot, I'm a bruja, right? And I mean, it's fun to play with, but at the same time, if you're being serious about it, it's an issue. So let me give you an example. I've seen books come out by non-POC writers talking about brujeria, and they're talking about limpias, and even POC writers for that matter. And that's, to me, is hard, because we're trying to educate people and to understand that these are the practices that we grew up with. And so we're just trying to keep that distinction. But I would say the one thing that probably, when it comes to brujeria, is that this idea that it's always of the devil, right? That's the main thing. It's of the devil. Everything, it's just like witchcraft, right? You say that it's of the devil. And yes, there are some brujos and brujas that work with the devil. There are. But not every form of brujeria works with that. We have brujeria working with, like I said, people like Venus, Santa Muerte, Mashimon, San Pascual, like all these other saints and folk saints, not necessarily just the devil or just dark, evil types of presences.
I don't know kind of where I stand anymore, because I think I'm becoming like those like older people in the community that were just like, we'll just let people do their own thing. We'll work on ourselves and we'll do what we have to do, right? Yeah. Because in El Paso, we didn't even call it brujeria. We just call it trabajos, like workings, right? I think it's just where you come from. Obviously, we have a generation now, especially in the U.S., that really wants to reclaim the word bruja, brujo, brujeria in general. And that's totally fine, right? You're allowed to do your own thing. Specifically, what I'm understanding now is that even our ancestors, the Mexica, depending on what season you were born in, that automatically you were recognized as someone who could manipulate the forces, right? So I think in our tradition, what I believe in is that my ancestors, they recognized you as a person who can do these things. And I think that tradition is being lost, because even in curanderismo, right, we had curanderos recognized young children as, they have the don, or they have something about them that they need to be practicing these things, and that's lost. So it's like becoming its own thing. It's totally fine. I think what Alexis and I want to do is remind people there's also this, which is from the past, traditional. I'm very much a traditionalist, but I definitely also understand the resurgence and wanting to reclaim that for ourselves. You know?
So I think it would be safe to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you all have had paranormal experiences. I think some people would say that the work that you do innately is supernatural. It's paranormal in a sense. I'm curious if either of you have had, either individually or maybe in doing the work together, if you've had any experiences that were really impactful or that maybe even frightened you. Because I would imagine that it could be a little difficult to scare you all because, you know, I'm sure you work with your...
I'm already getting excited.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I'm sure that, you know, you all have your protections. You work with spirits and with guides and ancestors that also guide and protect you. So like, I'm like, do you ever actually get scared? Does the opportunity happen? I'm seeing your reaction already. So please let me know. Let us know.
So I have like two instances, right? One of my first memories was actually seeing a spirit, and I was sharing a bunk bed with my brother. I was in the top one, and it was right when the light was breaking through in the morning. And I look to my door and I see someone who I think is like maybe even my cousin, but traditional, very pale, wearing old style clothes, and it freaked me out, but it didn't scare me, right? And I turned the other way, facing the wall, and then of course when I turned back, they were gone.
Oof.
I told my parents about it. They didn't really say anything, but they took me to a curandero just to make sure, because I started to see spirits when I was little.
Yeah.
And the curandero said, we'll get these iron scissors, we'll bless them and put him by his bed to remove any sort of negative spirits that are trying to mess with them. So that was my first one. The most recent one was when I acquired a San Cipriano book. And there's a lot of legend around the book, right? So that it has its own energy and it can be inviting negative and positive things into your life. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I put the book next to my bed. I had a chair right there, and I had to put the book there. And then around 3 o'clock in the morning, I started to have very, very vivid dreams in the valley, in El Paso, old Bruja's house, and everything like that. It was almost like tests and trials.
Yeah.
And then I remember going into like sleep paralysis. And I remember seeing like this force all around me trying to like literally like the classic like choke me, right? And at that time, this sounds fanatical, but it's not. My spiritual guides in my mind's eye in the spirit world gave me like this dagger. And with the dagger, they told me, you have to defend yourself. So I took the dagger and I cut off this entity's hands. Oh my God. And then I woke up. And immediately I thought to myself, and the message came to me, I have literally just been initiated into the cult of San Cipriano. And I passed the test.
Oh my God.
Later that night, I wrapped up the book. I put some holy herbs in the book, and I whooped that book's ass. Because you're supposed to. You have to show it like,
Yeah.
You're not going to dominate me. I'm going to need you when I need you. Don't ever do that to me again. You see? And I was like, that was super vivid to me.
Okay, before you answer, I need to share. So I've had an experience with the San Cipriano book, and I did not pass the test. I was not ready for her. So I bought the book, and I, like started kind of skimming through it, and then I slowly started reading it, and then I got to a point where I was like, I don't know if this is for me,
That part.
and especially right now. And
That's how I inquired the book. The girl was like, this is not for me. Do you want it? I was like, yeah, I'll take it.
So it definitely, at the time, thinking back to where I was in life then, this was maybe like almost 7 years ago. I don't know, years ago. It's definitely not for me, probably still not yet. But I was very curious. And so I got the book, and then I got to the point where I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. I'm going to return this. And I also felt that energy where I was like a little uneasy.
Did it freak you out a little bit? That's brujeria. That's the current of brujeria.
Yeah. And so I was like, no, this is not for me. And I also don't think I should hold on to it until I'm ready. I was like, I'm going to return it. And if I ever need to revisit or I feel like I'm ready, I will. So I was like, okay, I'm going to return it. So I go online to the retailer to return it. And I'm like shaking a little bit. And I put in the request and the site crashes. And I'm like, okay, let me try again. So I keep trying and the site is just not working. Mind you, like I have like other tabs open. They're all working fine. Service is okay. I was like, it's their website, whatever. So I call the number and I say, hey, I have a book. I need to do a return. This is my order number. And she's like, okay, if you could just go ahead and the call drops. I was like, I'm telling you, I'm not ready for you. Like, I'm so sorry I bothered you. I'm trying to step away. And I called again. And I was like, hey, I'm so sorry. I just had this call drop, whatever. And I explain again. And they're like, oh, if you just bring it into the retailer, they'll accept it. I was like, okay, thank you so much. And before they could even respond, they're like, okay, the call drops again. And I was like, I'm getting rid of you. I was like, this relationship is not ready yet, obviously. And I don't want to piss you off or bother you anymore. So I'm going to go send you maybe somewhere where you're, more respected or just someone more equipped for you. And so I had to physically go in. Mind you, the whole time I was driving, I was like, please do not get in a car crash. Please. I was like, I hear you loud and clear. I shouldn't have done this, like not ready yet. So fortunately I made it, returned the book, and so it's funny that you brought that up and you mentioned this. I didn't know the lore about like the energy around the book itself, but I definitely felt it and was like,
and that's what Alexis and I talk about, right? This idea that we want to reclaim a term that has been a tradition for a very long time. And then you get something like that book and you're not ready for what's inside that book because it's what we might consider sinister and things like that, right? And it freaks us out. And then the energy starts to attach itself to us and then it starts to take over our lives. We've had literally people bring in those books and just, hey, do you want this? I'm just going to give it to you. I'm like, yeah, sure. That's brujeria.
And I learned that actually when I was in high school from this lady who was a bruja. Her name was Lorraine. And she was the one that told me, she was like, you cannot just like keep your books prim and proper, like on a library. Like she's like, you have to dominate those books. You have to wrap them up in chains. You have to throw them across the room. And then she was like, I like to put mine under the bedpost, so that it cannot open. And I was like, wow,
that lady has some cool stories.
What are these books? What are they? I'm like, I need these books.
And so, I'm sorry, this was who? Lorraine who?
Her name was Lorraine Ramirez.
Okay.
And she was the first bruja I ever learned from in my hometown. And she actually had, and this is actually the story I was going to tell too. She had what she called her witch house, which was literally like, it was her house. And then she had this really old, decrepit, like falling apart house.
That's old school too, man. I'm not even kidding.
And it was like, we were like in the kitchen and all her brujerias everywhere. And it was pretty crazy. And so one time she was like, I want y'all to come help me with this working that I'm going to do. And I'm like, okay. So we go as me and my friends, because we were all into witchcraft at the time. And she sets up like this pot and puts it on the table. And then she has like this little wax figure that she's putting together. Like she's literally making it out of wax. And she sticks like a photo inside. And then she's taking pins and putting it in the doll or the wax doll. And every time she's doing it, she's like saying things like, may she go crazy, may she do this, like pretty intense stuff, right? And then she kept saying like, may she have a heart attack, and like putting like pins in the heart. And then she put this whole wax doll in this pot, and she took some lamp oil and she like throws the lamp oil and then sets it on fire. And then it starts to make this kind of a woofing sound, like woof, 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 woof. And then it starts to sound like a heartbeat. It's like woof, woof, woof. And then it starts going like that. And then it just kind of just like goes out.
Like flatlined.
And I was like, that is crazy. And then I got sick the next day, like just horribly sick. And I got better after a few days. Then I got sick again. And then I got better. And then I got sick again. And like each time, like the doctor's like, why? What's going on? Like, how are you getting sick over and over again? Like, it's impossible, because usually you get sick with like a flu or something. You got the antibodies for a while. But I literally got sick 3 times after that. And so it kind of really freaked me out. That was definitely like one of the crazier experiences. The other experience, I literally had one just the other day here. I was like here at the register and I was on my phone doing something. And I was like, somebody's watching me. I turn around and the best thing I could describe is like a 7 or 8 foot tall being was standing behind me. And I was like, "Gah!" So yeah, we do get scared. It's not like we're like, "Oh yeah, I've seen it all."
Yeah,
like stuff like that happens definitely.
Did they at least buy something?
Oh, this figure about the skull. Oh yeah, so we sell human bones here. Like it's something that we have some right now, and we've had human skulls before, and we had one that we had just gotten in, and we still had it at like the house. So we're just like, oh, okay, it's, it's fine. So you had already left.
No, I had an experience the night before.
He had experience that
So
night.
I was taking a shower. We had just bought that skull in. And I live like Alexis and I used to be partners. We were together for a while. And when I would take a shower, just leave the door open, right? Whatever. And the shower that we had didn't have like an actual like shower curtain because it had like a divider. And so I left it open and I looked to the room area and I could see like an outline of somebody walking across the room. And I thought it was Alexis. And I was like, hey, Alexis. And nothing, right? I was like, okay, whatever. And then the next day, Alexis has an experience.
I was sitting at the table and the table was like, it was actually that table. I was sitting at the table and behind me, I had just kind of set the skull like on this windowsill that we had that was really big. It was like almost like 2 feet. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll take it to the shop later, that kind of thing. And so I'm sitting there and I'm on my computer or something, working on something. And I just kind of like do this kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. I feel like my shirt's choking me or something. And then I do it again and I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm choking. And then it started to feel like hands were choking me. I was like, okay, I was like, something's going on. And I like, what is going on? Like, what's different? What's changed? You know what I mean? Because we have the house pretty protected. And then I turn around and there's the skull just like staring at me.
Just looking at you.
And I'm like, all right. So it was like, you want to mess with me? Fine. And I grabbed it and I took it to, at the time we had this garage where we kept like all the Palo stuff, for example. And I said, fine, I'm going to put you with the spirits. And I wrapped it up in a handkerchief and I put it there with the spirits. And everything was fine. But then Eric gets home and he's like,
what did I say?
You were like, I had the craziest dream last night.
Oh yeah. I was like, the dream. I had a dream was like, I don't know if I was like in lucid dreaming or something, but I had a dream someone was like choking me. And I was like, oh my God. I felt like I was getting choked. It's that damn skull.
You're like, it's that damn skull.
God.
So we named him the Choker.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, like that was it. That was the Choker. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Alex has him now.
I don't know.
One of our friends who actually teaches from McLean Academy is a brujo in South Texas. I think he has the Choker now.
Oh my God. Do you know any history of who that skull was? Or
no,
it was a male skull.
Male skull, yeah. And he had is that the one with the really messed up teeth? I can't remember. Yeah, he had this really messed up like teeth. But we've had that one, and we had one called the Biter because every time we would see it, it looked like a Pac-Man. Like,
oh yeah,
it was like like that kind of thing. But yeah, they have personalities, and some of them are not great. We've had a really nice one, actually. We had this one it was an Asian male skull that just brought so much happiness to the shop. Like every time people would see it, they'd be like, oh, I feel so light. And, and then even when we sold, we were so sad that he was gone.
My friend leaving.
Yeah, exactly. But we have had experiences like that for sure. And we've had also just some more positive ones too.
Oh,
yeah. Any that you care to share?
I mean, the one that I always tell, because this was amazing, was when we had an individual call in the morning saying, is there any way that y'all can fix a candle for me? And we're like, yeah, what's going on? He's like, well, I'm here at the hospital. He's like, my son was in a really bad car accident. And they're telling me that he's not going to be able to walk again, that he's shattered like all these bones in his body, and that, possible brain bleeding. It was pretty intense. He was in ER. And he's like, I'm from Corpus Christi, and I go get my candles fixed at Tex-Mex Curios, which we know very well. We actually know the owners of Tex-Mex Curios. And I said, okay. He's like, I know that, candles can do things. I've seen them heal all kinds of things. And I just, I want to get my candle fixed for my son. And I said, absolutely. So come on by. So we open in a few minutes. So he comes by and he's showing me pictures. And I mean, he looks bad. He's covered in blood. And then I said, well, we're going to fix a Cruz de Caravaca candle, because the lady who runs Tex-Mex Curios, she wrote a book on the Cruz de Caravaca, a really great book that I always recommend to my students. And it's an all healing candle. It's known for its miraculous properties. So he was like, can you all burn it for me? Because the hospital won't let me burn it in the room. And we're like, yeah, that's not a problem. So I said, before we do that, I want us all to get together and we're going to pray over this candle. So it was him and I think his girlfriend, and we're all holding the candle and praying for his son. And I took the candle home and I said, give me your phone number. When the candle's done, I'll text you and let you know that it's clear or whatever. The next day, I was actually off, but Eric was working, and he gets a phone call. And the guy says, he literally just walked out of the ER. And the doctors can't figure out how this happened. Like they're like, they don't know how, but he walked out. Like, he's like literally, because I texted him, I was like, hey, your candle is clear. And he's like, he literally did not even take the wheelchair. Like, he literally walked out of ER.
Miraculously.
Oh, it's got to feel so, like, I didn't even want to say rewarding, but just like, I feel like I would feel so grateful to who or whatever is out there for like listening and responding and like holding that family.
That's the attitude we share. You know, it's we never take like, oh yeah, we did that. You know, we're like, well, we petitioned on your behalf, and this energy took interest in you, and
that's spirit. You know, that's spirit, that's God, that's whatever you want to call it. They did the work. All we did was help.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Whew. Oh my God. What a beautiful, beautiful light note to get close to the end of the episode on. So speaking of spirits and whether positive or negative, what is something, I'm curious, this is something I am trying to ask all my guests now. I'm curious if there's anything that is currently haunting you. And by that, I mean, is there a song, a book, a musician, a movie, anything that's just kind of like won't leave your head for some reason that you've been either attached to or has been attached to you lately?
I mean, what isn't haunting us?
Right.
I mean, you know this too, as I work with the Night Owl podcast, I'm always having to put myself in those situations, right? Always having to work with spirits and clear spirits out. But, I mean, I would say that I think we're both kind of at an Aleister Crowley kick lately. And so he's definitely been haunting us lately.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've been reading Aleister Crowley for a really long time, but for some reason, like, you started reading magic and I was like, oh, I'm rereading magic. And then, like, you know, it's kind of going back and forth. But I think for me, what haunts me is, this is probably the most honest answer you're ever going to get out of me too. What haunts me is the fact that I have so much more that I want to learn and I want to do. And I just feel like I don't have the time to do it.
Yeah.
That's what haunts me the most, because I want to be able to travel more and go experience more of these traditions in the heartlands, right? To be able to go see one of my gurus he lives in Italy, but he goes to India many, many times, you know, because that's where he's from. Or to be able to go to Brazil and work with my teacher in Brazilian Quimbanda, you know, to go to Cuba and visit the grave of Da Jose, the most famous, you know, palero in the world, essentially, you know, so that type of thing, that's probably what haunts me, because as we said earlier, this is a lot of work and running a shop takes a lot of time. So we'll get there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. I think what's been on my mind recently a lot is, it sounds weird, but like New Orleans. I used to go there like every single year, right? And then recently I've just been getting hit with like New Orleans. To visit New Orleans.
We literally went like right before we opened.
That was the last time we went.
And that was the last time.
That's calling you back.
Yeah.
It needs to show you or tell you something.
Yeah, nothing fun. I mean, I guess it could be fun, but you know, it's not like, oh yeah, Billie Holiday is calling me.
Yeah.
Or something, you know.
I'm curious, and this is also like a personal question, is I think I can see him on the stickers over there, but also on the bags that you like give people, the little figure with, it looks like leaves sprouting from the head. Yeah, I'm curious, can you tell us who that is and why them? If you'd like to, you don't have to share if it's too personal of a connection.
No, well, so I mean, our name is City Alchemist, right? Which is a name that Eric came up with. It's a fantastic name. It means, you know, as an alchemist, you have the ability to make things change, to manifest. And we are in the city, you know, so we talk about this idea of like, it's one thing to be able to go out into the woods and do your witchcraft, but we have to work in this industrial park, right? And we have to be able to connect to the energies through that. And so for the longest time, our image was the aloe vera, which we have a lot of association with, but we wanted to change it up a little bit. And we both really liked the mandrake. We actually both have the mandrake tattoo. and because it's a representation of that alchemical change and reaction, essentially. So we were like, why don't we just change it to the mandrake? And we both have a mandrake tattoo. We both associate ourselves with it. So that's how it showed up.
Also, for me, supposedly, there's some lore in the 1960s that gay witches were also using the symbol of the mandrake as a form of resistance to the system. So that's another like legend that's out there. Whether we can prove it or not, we don't know.
That is
But
so
it's
cool.
documented that male witches in the 1960s would use it as a symbol of.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get a matching one with you.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
The mandrake and the horn
Wow.
yeah, were considered.
But there's also the lady drake too.
That is
Yeah, we
so
have
cool.
the patch up there actually.
Yeah.
The lady drake,
Oh, I see her.
or as I like to call her, the wool mandrake.
The woman drake, yeah, the she drake. Because I remember now that you mentioned it, I remember the original the aloe vera plant that y'all used to have.
We still have it on the sign outside.
Yeah. Oh my god, how cool! Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, and then we'll be right back. We're gonna go ahead and take a break. Welcome back. All right, we are once again joined by Eric and Alexis of City Alchemist. Now we're going to talk about paranormal investigations, as you both have done. Alexis and Eric, you've both been on the Night Owl, which has been, 3 years now? Best of Austin podcast?
3, yeah, I think. Yeah,
Steven, give
something
me
like
a
that.
chance. But honestly, one of my favorite shows too. It is like a go-to. I always save it for road trips because between episodes, I'm like, please, I need the next one.
Yeah.
So please go listen to the Night Owl. It's so good, and I love the work that you all do over there. But I'm curious about, I guess, your perspectives as practitioners, as and maybe for other like mediums and psychics out there, if they're curious about this sort of thing. So could you share a bit about your experience as paranormal investigators or as people who have done paranormal investigations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I met Steven in college, and we were both actually one film school. And it was funny because we talk about this a lot, how we kind of had like a tiny little rivalry, not in a bad way, but just kind of like we were both making really fun, creepy films. Yeah. And we were like, oh, who does this person think they are? Like that kind of thing. And then it turned into us realizing that we loved the same type of movies, especially paranormal movies. And then I was kind of like, hey, do you believe in ghosts? He's like, I do believe in ghosts. And I was like, well, when I was younger, I used to go like to the graveyards and take tape recorders. She's like, oh, I used to do that stuff too. And then it went from there to like, let's do that, And then whenever he moved here and I moved here shortly after, we just kind of continued with doing that through a group we had called the Occult Sciences Society. And then afterwards, that kind of ended, and we started working together at the same nonprofit. And that's when he was like, I have this idea for the show. Actually, this was the original idea. He's like, I have this idea for the show where I just interview people who are having haunted experiences at their workplace. And then we just get all the stories and the history. But then he just kind of like randomly decided to invite Sarah, and then Sarah started picking things up, and that's literally the first episode of the show. And it became kind of the formula. It was bringing in clairvoyance and psychics. And I was already involved with the show, but I was kind of in like behind the scenes. You didn't hear my voice or anything until later. Whenever he had me coming in and helping out with the more spiritual aspects of the show. So clearing out negative energies, showing people how to protect themselves, showing people how to deal with spirits in their own home, things like that. And so I already had a paranormal background, but it just kind of like mixed with my spiritual background. And that's kind of how I found myself on the show.
Yeah. Eric, what about yourself?
Well, just like through Alexis, through association, just like going to every now and then. I used to go to like some investigations. I think I also clean like houses that have spirits in them, so I clean those houses too. I actually cleaned Monica from Soul Solace's studio one time.
She told me about some experiences there. If y'all haven't heard that episode, go check it out. So, I mean, and listening to the Night Owl, but also like getting to know you all a little bit more. I'm really appreciative and interested in your approach to like the limpias and stuff, and like the cleansings of not only people but of like their spaces. And when you're encountering entities, let's call them, or spirits, I get the sense that you approach it with a set of like ethics. And I'm curious about your approach to, and maybe, I guess, yeah, just how you like ethically approach cleansing a space, especially when you encounter an entity, whether it's human or non-human.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I will say this with the night owl, we have yet to come across an inhuman spirit. I mean, with the exception of elementals and gnomes, for those of you that know the stories. But I think the biggest thing for us is like, we have to remember that these are human energies, right? These are human people who at one point, had normal lives just like us. So I think that the biggest issue that we see a lot is that people have a tendency to kind of mistreat spirits, right? They come in to their space and they're like, make noises for me or make a banging sound or whatever. And it's very much like a show, right? So I think that the biggest thing is we have to look at it from the perspective of humanize it a little bit more, have empathy and sympathy. You know what I mean? That's the biggest part of it. So we do that a lot. As healers, I think too, for that matter, we don't go in there and be like, we're going to blast all these spirits out. We go in there with this idea of like, okay, well, let's see who needs to go. Are they stuck here? Why are they stuck here? What can we do to help them? And then if we get at those people who are like, I just want to cause chaos and wreak havoc, then those ones we're probably going to, help them, push them out a little harder.
Yeah, a little nudge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, since I know I don't do the podcast a lot, but I have experiences with like spirits and things like that. I don't really tell a lot of people at all, actually, but I have performed like what you might consider like exorcisms, and the ethics that's involved with that. You have to be very careful how to navigate those types of situations, because not only are you dealing with an entity that has basically got into somebody's astral or spiritual body, but you're also dealing with the person who's the victim as well, and then trying to heal the components of why it happened, but yeah, I have Alexis like very respectful, right? I think my specialty is removing harsher energies and what we might consider negative spirits. So for me, my spiritual guides have helped me to develop a type of attitude of very like, we're going in with the mission, do not deviate from it, and you have to do what you have to do. And what I have to do is be very, very forceful,
Yeah.
That's my personality in general. Sometimes this is very, very like Mars energy with that,
Yeah. Which is, do you all have maybe a bit of advice for either like psychic mediums or brujas or people who have a practice, who have a skill set, who want to use that skill set to help people with these kinds of cleansings or investigations or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that when it comes to working with spirits or with a podcast, I'm an investigator first and a spiritual leader, if you will, second, an occult expert. Meaning that I'm going to go in there with an investigative mind of what is an actual spirit, what is just made up, what is most likely just wind, or those types of things. If you go in there with this mindset of like, I am a spiritual healer and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to blast out anything that's negative, you're not keeping it balanced, right? We refer to it as open-minded skepticism. Be open-minded, but also be skeptical. You got to find that balance. Not everything is a spirit. Not everything is a demon, So bring that part first. That's the first thing I say. Then once you have discovered what is happening and investigated and done that part, that's when you put your spiritual cap on and say, okay, now how can I either help or remove this energy or entity? I think that's the biggest part of it. So many of the mediums and occult experts that we see sometimes on these types of like paranormal shows go there with immediate like the D word, right? It's a demon. It's a demon. We got to remove it. We have to do this hoodoo spell or whatever it is to remove it. it's not always the case, right? It's really rare, first off. And not only that, but like as a spiritual practitioner, we also know that demons aren't necessarily a bad thing. They're just extremely powerful entities that don't necessarily think the same way we do, right? They don't have the same vibes that we carry, that type of thing. And yeah, some of them are mischievous and some of them just do want to wreak havoc. But most of the time, they're just kind of like, I got my own thing, I got my own thing I'm worrying about. And y'all are over here like, you're agitating me.
Yeah.
That type of deal.
Yeah. If you agitate someone enough, they're going to respond.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, whether it's a human entity or another. So I think that's the biggest thing, and we're seeing a lot more of that than we're seeing demons just going out there to wreak havoc on people. Not saying that it doesn't happen, it does, but to me, it's more rare. I think people get upset with me a lot on investigations because they expect me to come in with that mindset of like, it's a spirit, I got to clear you, we got to do a limpia. And I'm just kind of like, no, honestly, this is something that you can just tell it to leave you alone, and it will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Eric, any advice?
I think my advice would be to have a healthy balance between humility and confidence. Listen more than you talk. That's definitely been something that my mentors have taught me, is listen more, talk less. And I've known very strong mediums who you don't even know that they're a medium or a brujo or anything like that, because they just stay quiet. They listen more, right? Like Alexis said, you have people coming in, look at me, right? And my advice is just to listen as best you can, because you find out a lot about a place just by staying quiet.
I do need to add one more thing about mediums, especially because this is something that I've seen a lot in the field. Mediums who are not very well trained, and I'm not trying to, call anybody out or anything.
Say their name. No, I'm kidding.
They have a tendency to create stories.
Exactly.
So, for example, they hear something or see something, and instead of trying to piece the puzzles together, they piece the puzzle together in their mind and create a story. Oh, well, this person made this specific gesture, so it must mean that they're being held by a demon or energy. It could be that we're just not interpreting it or understanding it correctly.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the biggest thing for mediums is really focus on your practice, study, learn, train. Just because you're a natural medium doesn't mean that you can't train.
To train.
I go to the spiritualist church every Sunday to help open up my mediumship. We do a free mediumship class every Thursday to help develop mediumship. I'm never going to stop learning, So I think that's a big part of it. And so many times do people come in there thinking like, I'm a medium and I have the ability, therefore I can see and I know everything.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you all so much for that advice. And thank you for joining us for this episode. We were at the end of our questions today. Again, I really appreciate you all having me here. I was telling Dan, and thank you, Dan, behind the camera, that this interview has been a long time coming. I have been visiting Study Alchemist. I've been visiting y'all since before I moved to Austin. And then as soon as I moved here, I was like, I got to have them on the show. And it was always like, let's record. Yeah. And then I just never did anything. So I'm happy we're finally able to make it happen to bring you all to the listeners of Susto. And if you all are out there, if you are in Austin, if you are visiting, please, I implore you, do yourself the favor and come visit City Alchemist, take a class, come to an event, follow online. And again, if people wanted to do that, where could they visit you all online?
So Instagram is a really good way to reach out to us. I would say respond to it more so than email, to be honest, because we have like thousands of emails. Instagram's good. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. You can also reach out to our personal Instagram. Mine is Journey to McMahon on Instagram. And also, you can email us, info@cityalchemist.com or .co, either one. We own both. And I would say the other thing, too, is you can always call the shop. Everybody who works here has the ability to help you out in any way that we can. And if we need to take it to a higher level, we will. We've had cases for the night owl happen because of people that came into the store. So feel free to reach out. And that's a big thing, too. I think I tell this all the time to people. I'm like, reach out to us. Like, we will try our best to help you. And so many times people are like, oh, I just didn't want to bother you. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But I mean, yeah, we're busy, but at the same time, we will make the time. We will make the time to help in any way that we can. And if we can't help you, we will send you to somebody who can. That's really a big thing about us. Even at our store, like we don't have the product, we'll send you to the place we know that does have it.
Yeah. And Eric, any online things that you would like to plug?
No, Alexis pretty much covered all of them. My personal handle on Instagram is Brujo Colibri, so you can find me there. Just search Eric Librado, and I'm there. Like Alexis said, I'm very good at responding to DMs for some reason, and not like professional emails.
Yeah.
I think it's just like the generational gap there, but I'm pretty quick.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you all so much. And we'll talk to you in the next one. And until then, no te asustes. Bye.